On the coast itself, temperatures struggling to 10 or 11 degrees. Further west, though, in the sunshine, feeling very pleasant as we see temperatures getting into the low 20s. One or two heavy showers breaking out over Dartmoor, Bodmin Moor and perhaps other parts of Devon and Cornwall this afternoon, but very hit and miss, and they should tend to fade through this evening. If you do catch one, though, could well be on the heavy side. For most places, it's a cracking evening, lots of spring sunshine to be had, but it does feel fresh on those North Sea coasts with that breeze continuing to push in a little bit of low cloud, half fret at times, and we'll see that increasing again as we go through the evening and overnight. More of these eastern areas susceptible to that misty and murky weather coming in, maybe even the odd little bit of drizzle here and there too. But for most, it's a dry night. Certainly most western areas just stay with clear skies. That will allow temperatures to fall away through parts of central western Scotland well down into single digits. On to Thursday, it's a similar story. Likely to be a bit duller first thing over the Midlands and southeast England. That cloud should tend to melt away, but it may take a while before it clears away from eastern areas. And again, on the east coast, it may stick around for much of the day. Certainly that east coast will again be cooler. Elsewhere, actually, temperatures not as high tomorrow, but still pleasant in the afternoon sunshine.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What does it feel like to be a Great British Giveaway winner?
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God, I'm gonna cry.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
Yes, that is fantastic.
You know, you have no idea how much I needed it. Oh my goodness.
That's wonderful. Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I was gobsmacked. Thank you, GB News.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
You really could be our next big winner. Head over to gbnews.com/win now to find out how and get your entry for the Great British Giveaway. Great prizes, even greater wins.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Not long till the Prime Minister's question time. I wonder what the leading opposition will go on today.
Well, there's the gift of the farmers from the Agriculture Minister. There's the Brexit Reset Summit next week.
Yeah.
We know that the Shadow Cabinet have signed letters saying that they will overturn any changes to Brexit. if they form the next government. What else could it be?
I think it'd be good to go into the detail of the government's immigration strategy, because there are some seemingly good announcements in there, but the detail is quite confusing about whether or not it will work, whether these are new announcements, whether the restrictions will actually bring down numbers. So I think the details of that would be interesting.
I tell you who's down also to ask a question, PMQs, Nigel Farage.
Oh,
now,
is he on the list?
When he rises, if he gets called by the Speaker and he rises to ask his question, he's going to be howled at from both sides because of the Metropolitan, the Crown Prosecution Service deciding to take no action against Rupert Lowe.
Also attend?
Well,
and where will he sit?
Of course, we know Rupert Lowe's in Great Yarmouth, if you remember.
Oh, of course, yes.
He's
so he won't be there
out
today.
looking at wind farms, offshore wind farms, and he's issued that extraordinary inflammatory statement.
Yes,
so that will be a bit of theatre for Nigel Farage, won't
very
it?
interesting. So, of course, Nigel Farage is in this very strange position where he's at 30% in the polls, but in the House of Commons, he's only got the support of 5 or MPs.
Yeah.
So he's not going to get huge cheers.
No, quite the reverse.
It's quite an intimidating environment, actually, because it is so packed. The House of Commons really only has seats for about 400 people, and yet there are 650 MPs. So it's a very, very cramped atmosphere. When you stand up,
but he thrives on it, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, he does. But it's very loud in there, and you often can't hear what's being said. I don't know how ministers hear the question. Perhaps they don't. Maybe that's why they don't always answer.
Did you find it nerve-wracking, asking a question?
PMQs is quite nerve-wracking because it is so full, and because, you know, it's widely watched, whereas a lot of debates throughout the week aren't widely watched, and it's more relaxed. But it is, you know, it's a very exciting atmosphere, and, you know, it's quite jovial often, actually, and there's an element of theatre to it.
She could also go for them on unemployment, which has reached a 4-year high.
Yes,
Kerry Badenoch. Job vacancies falling.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of economic bad news for which to challenge the Prime Minister.
And I think the question is always, you have these 7... The Leader of the Opposition has 7 questions that they're allowed to ask. Do you do 7 different topics and try to wrong-foot your opponent, or do you try and stick to the same topic and dig deeper and deeper? And we're about to go... If you have sent your question in, please don't forget to say where you're from as well, but we're going to PMQs now.
Absolutely.
Mr. Speaker, over the past week we've secured a historic trade deal with India and a landmark agreement with the United States, protecting and creating British jobs, slashing tariffs and driving economic growth. We've also published a white paper setting out how this government will end the open borders experiment of the party opposite, bringing net migration down, backing British workers and delivering fair control of our borders. Mr. Speaker, I know the whole House will also want to mark the 40th anniversary of the Bradford City fire. We remember the victims of that devastating tragedy and celebrate the strength of the community. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 14 years of Conservative cuts have stripped the Environment Agency of the resources and the staff they need to properly deal with badly managed landfill sites, blighting communities like mine. The Jameson Road landfill site in my constituency of Blackpool North and Fleetwood has been producing toxic stenches for over a year now, causing nosebleeds, headaches, vomiting and breathing problems for my residents. Will the Prime Minister commit to ensure the Environment Agency have the staff and resources to police badly managed sites like this and across the country so they can act swiftly and effectively to protect communities like mine?
Mr. Speaker, I love the fact that when anyone says 14 years of a Conservative government, they'll go, oh no, that's how the country feels. Mr. Speaker, once again, a hard-working Labour MP clearing up the mess that was left behind. Our residents deserve far better. We expect rapid improvements. We're closely monitoring air quality and won't hesitate to take further action. She's right, we must tackle rogue operators who blight our communities. That's why we boosted Environment Agency funding by £188 million alongside tough new rules on incinerators and commercial fly tippers.
Leader of the Opposition, come in there.
If I may, Mr. Speaker, Sir Roy Stone served 13 chief whips and prime ministers from Margaret Thatcher to Boris Johnson, and I'd like to pay tribute to his extraordinary service and send my best wishes to his family. And also, before we start, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say to the Prime Minister how horrified I was to hear about the attack on his family home. It is completely unacceptable, and I think I speak for the whole House when I say that this wasn't just an attack on him, but on all of us and on our democracy. Yesterday, we learned that unemployment is up 10% since the election. Why does the Prime Minister think unemployment is rising on his watch?
Mr. Speaker, can I pay tribute to Roy Stone as well and the service that was given us in various capacities. Can I thank her for her words about the attacks on me and my family and the kind messages from many others in the last few days. She did actually message me pretty well straight away, and I really do appreciate that, and she's absolutely right that this is an attack on all of us, on democracy and the values that we stand for. Mr. Speaker, she comes here every week to talk the country down. We've got 200,000 new jobs, record investment, 4 interest rates cut. Contrast that to the disastrous Liz Truss mini budget, inflation through the roof, and a £22 billion black hole.
I'm not sure the Prime Minister even knew that unemployment was up, but there's no point him blaming everyone else. The fact is, Conservatives reduced the deficit every year until the pandemic, more than doubled the personal allowance. We left 4 million extra jobs, tackled the post-pandemic inflation spike, and left the fastest-growing economy in the G7. Let's talk about what is happening today. Let's look at Beals, a 180-year-old department store in Dorset. They survived 2 world wars and the winter of discontent, but they couldn't survive this Labour government. Beals is having, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, a Rachel Reeves closing down sale. What does the Prime Minister have to say to all the people who have lost their jobs?
Mr. Speaker, nobody wants to see job losses, but she must be the only person left in the country who thinks the economy was booming after the last government. We've created new jobs, record investment, trade deals that they tried. The India deal, I think they tried for 8 years and failed. We did that deal. They talked about a US deal. We did that deal. We tend to get a stronger relationship with the EU. The former trade minister must be the only former trade minister who's against all trade deals which boost our economy. She says she's against the India deal, even though it's got the same provisions she put on the table. She's against the US deal, even though it saves thousands of jobs in car manufacturing. And Mr. Speaker, most absurdly, she says she's going to rip up the EU deal when she hasn't even seen what's on the page. They're reduced to a brain rot. A once great political party is sliding into brain-dead oblivion.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to welcome his tiny tariff deal, but the fact is, it has put us in a worse position than we were in March. He should not over-egg the pudding. Let's talk about how things are getting worse now. In every month of this year, household names like Sainsbury's, Tesco, Asda, and Santander have cut staff. The ONS estimates that there are 100,000 fewer jobs than a year ago. And this was before his jobs tax, which will make things worse. Can the Prime Minister promise the House that by this time next year, unemployment will be lower than it is today?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I think she just said a tiny tariff deal. Can I suggest that she gets the train to Solihull?
Yes, exactly.
2 hours, goes to speak to the workforce at JLR, their families, their communities, to tell them she would rip up the deal that protects their jobs. And when she's done that, she might travel across to Scunthorpe and tell the steelworkers there she's going to rip up the deal that saves their jobs. And then if she's got time, go up to Scotland and talk to the whisky distilleries. Tell them she'd rip up the deal that's creating 1,200 jobs for them, boosting their exports, and then come back here next week and tell us what reaction she got.
I didn't hear a promise to get unemployment down, and that's because he knows things are going to get worse. And this goes wider than businesses. Last week, I met staff and patients at Farley Hospice. They do fantastic work, but they need to find an additional £250,000 to pay the jobs tax. How does he suggest Farley Hospice, a charity which relies on donations, pays for his tax hike?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have provided £100 million boosting for the sector, and Children and Young Person Hospitals received £26 million funding this year. But, Mr. Speaker, she turns up every week to cart from the sidelines. But what she doesn't do, she moans about what we had to do in the budget to stabilise the economy. But she hasn't got the courage to stand there and say that she would reverse the next decisions that we take. And I know why. It's because she doesn't want to say she's against the £26 billion investment in our NHS. She doesn't want to say she's against the £1.2 billion more for our police. She doesn't want to say she's against the £3.2 billion more for our schools. All the time she doesn't have the courage of her convictions. It shows that her criticism is totally confected.
Mr. Speaker, I can't believe the Prime Minister is still using this figure. We had this very conversation at the dispatch box. He knows it is just capital spending. It's either he's not paying attention or he is saying things to disguise what is going on. That money will not pay for the jobs tax. He knows that, and the hospices know it too. And the other people who know that things are getting worse are the 5 leading business groups in the UK. They say that his so-called employment rights bill will be deeply damaging to growth. Does the Prime Minister accept that they are right, or does he believe that he knows better than business?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's the same old Tories. Every time better rights for workers are on the table, they vote against them. Respect and dignity and protection at work are good for workers, good for the economy, and good for growth.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister needs to listen to business. You cannot have employment rights without employment. Labour always forgets that it is not government that creates growth, it is business that creates growth. And businesses are closing, and they are blaming him and his Chancellor. There are 100,000 fewer jobs, Mr. Speaker. Hospices, charities, nurseries, they are facing bills from the jobs tax that they cannot afford. Even the unions say workers are being thrown on the scrap heap. And all of this before his unemployment bill makes hiring even more expensive. When will he admit that Labour isn't working?
Mr. Speaker, she says we should listen to it. She should listen to business.
I will have the last... Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, she should listen to business. They're in favour of our trade deals. The India deal. Fantastic deal. Tariffs on cars cut to 10%. Whiskey and gin, tariffs halved. £4.8 billion into our economy. What does she say she'd do with the India deal? She wants to rip it up. The US deal that saves thousands upon thousands of jobs. What does she want to do? She wants to rip it up. The EU deal, good for our economy. She's not going to even wait to see what it says. She absurdly says she's going to rip it up. It is so unserious. She even was reduced last week to calling the Indian government, accusing them of fake news. No wonder she did so badly as a Trade Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the project for them is over. They're sliding into oblivion. They're a dead party walking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of British jobs have been safeguarded by this government's trade agreement with the US. Including those in my constituency who work for Jaguar Land Rover, like my next-door neighbour Ollie, proving that when Labour negotiates, workers win. Can the Prime Minister confirm to me that he will continue to stand up for all workers and our vital motor manufacturing industry as he negotiates a better deal for Britain around the world?
Well, can I pay tribute to her for her work with JLR, standing up for the jobs in her constituency. The deal that we've agreed saves thousands of jobs in our car industry, securing the livelihoods of countless families. And, Mr. Speaker, I've been up to JLR on a number of occasions, including last week. I know firsthand what it means for their workforce, for their families and for their communities. And the Leader of the Opposition says she would go and tell them she's going to rip it up. She should go up there. She says she's going to get against it. The Reform Leader said, what did he say about JLR? He said JLR deserves to go bust. Shame on him. Labour are striking deals in the national interest.
The Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on behalf of my party, can I offer heartfelt congratulations to His Holiness, Pope Leo XIV? And can I offer our support to the Prime Minister and his family after the appalling arson attacks on his home? And can I echo his thanks to our brilliant police and firefighters? Mr. Speaker, 3 years ago, the previous government was faced with a choice. Their own Migration Advisory Committee told ministers that recruiting more care workers required improved conditions, career progression and better pay. But the Conservatives chose not to do that. That's not true, and instead brought in large numbers of care workers from overseas. Now, those carers looking after our loved ones in care homes should be thanked, not demonised. But will the Prime Minister do now the things the Conservatives refused to do, starting with a higher minimum wage for carers?
Prime Minister.
Can I first thank him for his comments about myself and my family? I do really appreciate it. It is important that we have fair pay for care workers, and that's why we've put in place our fair pay agreements. This is the first of its type. It will be applied first to care workers to ensure that they get fair pay, but also a better framework for progression. As he will know, most people leaving care work are leaving care work to go to the NHS because of the pay and the ability to progress. Our fair pay agreements will deal with that to make sure that in the future those jobs are more secure. And I would just add, Mr. Speaker, a declaration of interest. My sister is a care worker, and I know firsthand how important the work is and how difficult sometimes the situation is facing them.
Shred Davey.
For that reply, it's a good first step, but we'll still be seeing people earning more in Amazon warehouses and supermarkets than care homes, and that will mean our loved ones going without the care that they need. But turning to the Middle East now, Mr. Speaker, for more than 10 weeks, Israeli forces have blocked food, water and medicine getting into Gaza. There is now a humanitarian catastrophe with 2 million people at risk of famine and 1 in 5 facing starvation. Rather than ending this crisis, the Netanyahu government is planning to seize all Gaza indefinitely. Now, I know the Prime Minister will agree that the blockade to Gaza should end, and I'm sure he would agree that it would be appalling if Netanyahu proceeds with that escalation. But will he act now and pick up the phone to President Trump for a joint plan to recognise Palestine and get food, water and medicine into Gaza?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this because the situation in Gaza is simply intolerable and getting worse. And we are working with other leaders urgently to bring about rapid and unimpeded flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, which is desperately needed, obviously alongside the release of hostages, and to get back to a ceasefire, and that work is going on through my team 24/7. I do believe that is the initial action that needs to be taken, but I still fundamentally believe that however remote it may seem at the moment, the pathway to a two-state solution is the only way for settled and lasting peace in the Middle East, and we will continue with our allies to pursue that path.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Found in my constituency, Durdle Door is one of the most iconic bathing sites in all the country. So last Friday, I was joined at Durdle Door by my honourable friends, the members for Bournemouth East, Bournemouth West, Poole, and most importantly, Ron, the local seal, to test the water quality at Durdle Door. Currently, water quality testing at bathing sites is only monitored from mid-May to September, which puts the health of all water users at risk who could be potentially swimming in pollution or sewage. With this in mind, will the Prime Minister work with me and my honourable friends to introduce all year-round testing at popular bathing sites such as Durdle Door?
Prime
Mr. Speaker, everyone enjoying our beautiful beaches, lakes and rivers is entitled to know that the water is clean and safe. That's why we're modernising outdated bathing water regulations, including more regular monitoring sites to reflect local demand. And after years of failure by the party opposite, we're acting through our plan for change through new powers to tackle pollution, including banning bonuses, jail terms for law-breaking bosses and real-time monitors of every sewage outlet.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
This Prime Minister once spoke of compassion and dignity for migrants and for defending free movement. Now he talks of islands of strangers and taking back control. Somebody here has to call this out, Mr. Speaker. It seems the only principle he consistently defends is whichever he last heard in a focus group. So I ask him, is there any belief he holds which survives a week in Downing Street?
Yes, the belief that she talks rubbish. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I want to lead a country where we pull together and walk into the future as neighbours and as communities, not as strangers. And the loss of control of migration by the last government put all of that at risk. And that's why we're fixing the system based on principles of control, selection and fairness.
Jonathan Brash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Council tax is the most regressive and unfair tax in this country. It has become a tax on deprivation. The less affluent an area, the more you pay. The greater your need, the more you pay. A Bandy property in Westminster pays just £1,017 a year. In Hartlepool, it's £2,495 a year. For a Band H property, the difference between those two areas is £3,000. It is hammering people in towns like Hartlepool. Does the Prime Minister agree that this unfairness cannot continue, and will he commit to addressing this inequality once and for all?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend. He's been a dedicated campaigner on this for a very long time. As he knows, 14 years of mismanagement by the party opposite left councils on their knees with a total failure to improve and update how councils are funded. Through £69 billion of funding this year and the upcoming multi-year settlement, the first in over a decade, will give councils far greater certainty and stability. Our detailed funding review will create a fairer system to make sure his constituents see strong, affordable local services.
Wendy Moore.
Mr. Speaker, while the Prime Minister prefers to take to the international stage, back here at home, Labour's Birmingham bin strike is now in its 10th week. Rubbish is still piled on the streets and recycling goes uncollected. And the reputation of the West Midlands is being trashed. His ministers continue to wash their hands of this. His mayor doesn't even want to talk about it. So will the Prime Minister come to the West Midlands and sort this out? Because at the moment, it's only the squeaky blinders that are winning.
Prime Minister.
Well, further evidence, Mr. Speaker, of the decline of the Tory party when they say that going to Ukraine at the weekend to try and secure peace for Ukraine and for Europe and the security and defence of Europe is somehow the wrong priority. That conflict has already massively impacted people in this country through the cost of living crisis and energy. Ukraine, Europe and we deserve peace and to live in peace. Mr. Speaker, on dealing with the bin strikes is the priority. We continue to call on Unite to suspend the strike immediately and bring the disruption to an end. We are supporting the Council to ramp up the cleaning operation and now collecting over 1,100 tonnes of waste every day and continue to offer our support so the backlog doesn't reappear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I visited Sacred Heart Primary School in Hyndburn, where the excellent teachers expressed their frustration at the current SEND system. One wonderful boy, who despite being non-verbal and requiring personal support, has been waiting for over 18 months for an EHCP, and there is a risk now that he won't get a place in a school for the year ahead that suits his needs. How will the Prime Minister ensure that the voices of parents and children are at the heart of the SEN reforms that the government will bring forward?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. She's a powerful champion on this issue. Our principle is that every young person with special education needs should receive the right support to succeed. We've immediately announced an additional £1 billion for high needs funding, including almost 20 million for schools in Lancashire. We will support special schools and deliver truly inclusive places and expertise in mainstream schools to help every child thrive.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We at Reform, a party that is alive and kicking, very much enjoyed your speech on Monday. You seem to be learning a very great deal from us. But can I encourage you, please, to go further as a matter of national security? As a matter of national security. Over the weekend, an illegal immigrant from Iran, who we believe came by boat, was arrested in the north of England on serious charges of terrorism. Since the speech on Monday, 1,000 young, undocumented young males have crossed the English Channel. Does the Prime Minister agree now is the time to declare the situation in the English Channel as a national security emergency?
It wasn't my speech, it was the Prime Minister's.
Mr. Speaker, the situation is serious. The last government lost control of the borders. We are taking powers. The Borders Bill, precisely to his point, the Borders Bill is the first bill to give terrorism-like powers to law enforcement, precisely so that we can get in before the crimes are committed, before people get to this country. That's why this is the most far-reaching provision ever for law enforcement to defend and secure our borders. And that's why it is extraordinary that he, of all people, voted against it. And sooner or later he's going to have to explain it.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since my election, I've been championing and backing our country's plumbers, builders, electricians and all trades. These are not the people just building Britain, but holding all of our communities together. That's why I've been campaigning for tougher sentencing and action on tool theft, and for the real cost of this crime to be recognised.
For those listening on GB News Radio, just to say that Donald Trump has now landed in Doha. This, the second day of his Middle Eastern tour. Saudi Arabia yesterday, Qatar today. He's just landed on Air Force One, will be conducting further meetings, indeed conducting business deals throughout the day.
This crime.
Can I commend my honourable friend? She's led the campaign to highlight the devastating impact of these crimes. Mr. Speaker, for hard-working small businesses, the theft of tools isn't just a violation. It can mean thousands of pounds of potential work lost, with a huge impact to businesses and to families. We're investing over £1.2 billion extra into policing, with 13,000 new neighbourhood police to focus on crimes that impact on communities the most. And I pay tribute to my honourable friend, and I know the Justice Secretary will look at the details carefully.
Andrew Stone.
Mr. Speaker, whether you agree with the Prime Minister's net zero targets or not, I'm sure the Prime Minister will agree that you won't achieve them, or he won't achieve them, without taking people with him. The cabling corridor, substation corridor for the Morgan and Morecambe offshore wind farm is now one of the most objected to national energy infrastructure projects in the country. And what is angering myself and thousands of others is that there is a perfectly alternative cabling route further up the coastline, which would actually have local economic benefit, would be more cost effective as a whole life cycle project, and could connect to existing national grid infrastructure. But no one is listening. So will the Prime Minister now listen and pause the planning inquiry for the existing application and ask the Department to consider and cost the alternative route to avoid untold devastation to our coastline and countryside?
Can I thank him for his question? As he will know, the Secretary of State is going through a quasi-judicial exercise, and therefore I'm limited in what I can say, but let me do the best I can within those constraints, because the project is going through its examination, where interested parties can put forward their views on the application and should do so. And more broadly, as we drive forward renewable projects, the planning process is designed to ensure impacts are carefully considered. Thank you.
Fred Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The United Kingdom has rightly helped arm Ukraine with modern, effective capability, and we're sending them some £4.5 billion this year. But after decades of relying on the peace dividend, our own forces are ill-equipped for modern warfare. With colleagues interested in defence technology, I'm developing a proposal for a joint UK-Ukraine production hub on British soil. This would support Ukraine while also modernising our own forces at warfighting scale and creating the jobs and know-how needed to rearm and stay secure. Will the Prime Minister use his good offices to help support this proposal?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable and gallant friend is right that our ironclad support for Ukraine should go hand in hand with firing up our own defence industries, and that means well-paid secure jobs right across the country, including in Plymouth, and strengthening national security. We reiterated our support for Ukraine in Kyiv last weekend, and I'm proud that British industries are playing their part supporting Ukraine against Russia's illegal invasion. I'll make sure that he meets the relevant minister to discuss his proposal.
John Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People in the real world are disgusted by the Energy Secretary's obsessive pursuit of net zero at any cost. The Scottish Borders is under attack, with solar farms the size of towns, massive wind farms and now mega pylons scarring unspoilt landscapes. Nobody sensible supports his crazed crank policies that will put jobs at risk and rip up farmland. So when will the Prime Minister step in and stop his Energy Secretary throwing taxpayers' money at this nonsense?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, only a few years ago, dealing with the climate challenge was a shared endeavour across this House. And it's yet further evidence of how far his party has fallen, that they cannot see the significance and importance of tackling one of the major challenges of our time. I think we should rise to that challenge, not be defeatist about it. And it's further evidence, as far as I can see, that the Tory project is just finished.
Jake Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Male suicide is a tragic epidemic in our country. Each week, almost 100 men take their own lives, and suicide is the biggest killer of men aged under 50. In my constituency, I'm working with Andy's Man Club in Maltby, the learning community in Dinnington, and Better Today in Kiverton Park to try and raise awareness about the fantastic groups who offer support for men in the most difficult circumstances. Will the Prime Minister use this opportunity to support the campaign that we are undertaking in my constituency, and also reassure those groups and my constituents that mental health services for men will be a priority for his government?
Can I thank him for raising this crucial issue? And across the House, I know members will have their own personal and tragic experiences of suicide. Mr. Speaker, we've launched a call for evidence on our men's health strategy, which will improve men's health in all parts of the country, including tackling devastatingly high suicide rates. We're also investing £26 million in new mental health crisis centres, funding talking therapies for 380,000 more people and recruiting 8,500 more mental health workers.
Bobby Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The plans to upgrade St Helier Hospital and the delivery of a new specialist emergency care building have been put back by 10 years. Now, I'm talking with the Trust about a way to bring all or part of those plans forward, but in the meantime, they have a very real fear that some of the buildings on the existing estate are at risk of catastrophic failure before the decade is out. So can the government reassure me that they'll work with the local trust on a plan to maintain and adapt the existing estate to ensure that St Helier Hospital can survive all the way through to the major works being complete?
The honourable member's constituents have been badly let down by the previous government's empty promises, which were never going to deliver. We put the new hospitals programme on a sustainable financial footing, increasing the NHS capital budget to record levels so we can address the backlog of critical maintenance, repairs and upgrades. And I'll make sure that he gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss the particular case.
Melanie Neal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes is the renewable energy capital of England, delivering homegrown, secure energy and boosting local skills. And over 12,000 people are employed in a clean energy job in Greater Lincolnshire. But these jobs are now under threat from Reform's new mayor, who has declared war on renewables, putting livelihoods at risk. What steps will the Prime Minister take to protect jobs by supporting the supply chain and delivery of renewable projects?
Mr. Speaker, she's a superb champion for energy security, driving down bills and the good secure jobs that renewables offer. And the parties opposite are climate defeatists, anti-jobs, anti-growth, anti-business and anti-investment. And they should go and peddle their policies to the tens of thousands of people, working people in this country, working in renewables every single day. They don't think that Britain has the skills, and they would deny us incredible opportunities. We're focused on securing billions in investment, creating tens of thousands of jobs and taking us off the roller coaster of an international fossil fuels. Alison Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A constituent of mine, Victor Franklin, was made severely disabled after a savage dog attack left him with multiple amputations. Will the Prime Minister explain why pensioners like Victor, who become severely disabled after retirement, are excluded from claiming personal independence payments and are instead limited to the lesser support of attendance allowance? And will he commit to reviewing this unfair rule?
Prime Minister. Can I extend my thoughts to Victor and the awful circumstances that she describes, which must be extremely challenging. We do have to reform the system that we've got. It's not working. I think there's a general agreement about that, but the principles have to be clear, that we protect and secure those that need that protection and security. We help those who can work into work, and those who can work should work. But we have to reform the system that we've got to make it a better system, because what we've got doesn't work.
Nigel Cuttiska.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Every week I meet families in Barking and Dagenham who tell me that they worry about paying for their bills because they are on a 0-hour contract. My constituents want the chance to work hard in a secure job, earn a decent wage and have dignity in their workplace. As Labour plans for change delivers the biggest uplift in workers' rights in a generation, does the Prime Minister agree with me that Reform MPs working and voting against our employment rights bill show that they are no friend of workers in this country?
She's absolutely right. Let's be clear what the parties opposite voted against. Stronger statutory sick pay, they voted against. The right to guaranteed hours, they voted against. Protection from unfair dismissal, they voted against. Stronger protection for pregnant mothers, they voted against. Insecure work, a package worth £600 to the poorest workers, they voted against. Mr. Speaker, we're backing British workers. They vote against them at every turn.
Adam Dance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Maternity services in Yeovil are due to shut on Monday after a deeply flawed CQC inspection in January and be moved to Musgrove Park Hospital in Taunton, which does not have the capacity for an extra 1,300 births a year. While the closure is initially for 6 months, I've received no guarantee it will open again. This creates huge fear. Will the Prime Minister or relative minister agree to meet with me and colleagues in the South West to stop this decision?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to him for raising this issue, which must be of concern. I'm not across the details of it, I'm afraid, at this stage, but I will make sure that he gets a meeting with the relevant minister to get to the bottom of the issue that he's described.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. Point of order, James Richards.
Mr. Speaker, at Prime Minister's questions, the Leader of the Opposition claimed that unemployment had risen by...
You've been watching Prime Minister's Question Time. We are joined in the studio by a panel of politicians. And before we discuss what you've been hearing and the questions you've been sending in, we are going to tell you about the pictures that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen as Donald Trump has landed in Doha, which you would have been able to see. And if you were listening, we explained that to you when he got off that flight.
Absolutely magnificent pictures of a huge convoy of cars taking Donald Trump from the airport where he landed on Air Force One. Of course, he was in Saudi Arabia yesterday. Qatar today. But Donald Trump also came up in Prime Minister's questions, particularly the Prime Minister's trade deal that has been achieved with the United States. Is it a profound moment for liberalising free trade? Is it going to save jobs in Britain, or is it thin gruel? Delighted to be joined in the studio by the Labour Member of Parliament for Darlington, Lola McEvoy, and the Shadow Health Secretary, Ed Argar.
And let's start with you, Lola, our Labour representative.
Hi.
Morris says, and let me put this into the context of Prime Minister's Question Time, Kemi Badenoch attacked the Prime Minister and said that there was a jobs tax as a result of the budget, said that the government's policies were damaging the economy and harming and leading to the loss of jobs in this country. The Prime Minister came back and said, look at the trade deals that we are securing. But Morris's point is that the US deal wasn't that great a deal.
So I have to say I am over the moon with the US trade deal, predominantly around the steel industry, because it is absolutely imperative that we, in this country, have the ability to make our own steel, and those furnaces were about to be turned off. And I think with steel, it's the fire in the belly of our UK economy, because if we're going to be moving, which we are under this Labour government, to needing more defence manufacturing to securing our borders and our place in the world globally, we're going to need to be able to manufacture, and we need primary steel to be able to do that. So not only is it saving jobs, which is absolutely essential for working people in Scunthorpe, but it's going to have a knock-on effect across the country in manufacturing jobs, like in my area in Darlington.
Ed Argar, that's a fair point, is it not? The fact that, at least on a quota of steel, there'll be zero tariffs. That's a huge achievement from the government.
Well, you've got to look at two things, Tom. First of all, I think Kemi was absolutely right to highlight the impact of the budget decisions on UK businesses and jobs up and down this country. But on Donald Trump, President Trump, the US is our closest ally, so it's really important we do have a good relationship with the US. That's why I was disappointed that for months after the election of Donald Trump, before the inauguration, our government seemed to drag its feet, didn't engage, and was almost waiting for something to happen. What we saw was the president improve.
I don't think that's fair. That is not my understanding or recognition of it. I don't recognise what you're describing there. What I think is real is the fact that your government were trying to get a deal with the US and failed. And we've got a really good deal that is going to protect steel manufacturing in this country, which has that knock-on effect on defence. But also the car deal is really important.
It's also
Nissan
important to remember.
Area,
we've got
in the northeast.
Jaguar Land Rover, Scunthorpe Steel will rightly be pleased that they see something positive in this, and all those who work for them. We've also got to remember that we are still worse off in our trading relationship with America than we were before President Trump imposed those tariffs 6-8 weeks ago. So the Prime Minister may have struck a deal, but he hasn't struck a deal that puts us back where we were.
No, I think President Trump made it very clear that he was imposing a baseline of 10%, and I think the fact that we've managed to get this level out of the deal is fantastic. I also think, just on that point, this isn't just about saving the existing manufacturing jobs in this country. This is about growth long term. What kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to be independent? Do we want to be manufacturing? Do we want to have high-skilled, good jobs in the northeast? Yes, we do.
On that point, do we want to be independent? That's a big question, because there has been criticism, particularly from elements of the left in this country. We've heard it from the Greens, we've heard it from the Lib Dems, that this Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has been perhaps a little bit too sycophantic towards Donald Trump, that he's been kowtowing towards Donald Trump, offering invitations for a state visit to Donald Trump.
Yeah, because he's the President of the United States. No, it's not. I mean, come on. People will take a pop at whatever the Prime Minister does. That's par for the course. The fact is, this Labour government and this Labour Prime Minister are restoring our global reputation, creating new trade deals, but also making sure that Labour values are at the heart of those deals. So protecting manufacturing jobs, growing our economy, that is what we're in the market for. And in my area, you know, on the unemployment point that you raised, in my area, businesses are telling me that they haven't got the skills. Over the last 14 years, we've seen the hollowing out of trade skills and training for people my age. So we've got a real issue if we're going to deliver net zero and we're going to deliver the infrastructure that we need to actually get the growth in this country. So we're investing in skills as well.
You've got to hand it to this government for delivering that good relationship. I think Donald Trump referred to him, Keir Starmer, as a good guy. They are not sister parties, the Republicans and the Labour Party, but yet this government is doing their best for Britain in sustaining that relationship.
We are about to see, I think, the government sell out to the EU in the Surrender Summit, backtracking on Brexit next week. But I have to say, on the relationship with America, I do find myself to a degree in agreement with Lola, in saying that this is our most important ally.
Yeah.
This is a hugely important relationship, and it's right that the Prime Minister has sought to build that relationship with President Trump, the elected head of state of our most important ally. That's the right thing to do, and I think any Prime Minister would be doing that because that is in our national interest. Now, we can disagree on some of the detail of what's agreed or what isn't or what should have been, but I don't think we would disagree on the importance of that relationship and that strong relationship with whoever is in the White House.
Absolutely.
I wonder if there is a point of politics here. And we heard this a little bit in Prime Minister's questions, the idea that the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has changed his mind on immigration, that he's not a leader but a weather vane, going wherever the latest focus group will point him. and I wonder, I mean, looking at what Keir Starmer said about Donald Trump before he became Prime Minister, looking at what what the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, said about Donald Trump back when he was on the opposition benches.
There's no point going over it, though, is there? Because the fact of the matter is...
to the fact that a lot of
we've
people think
restored
that
and rebuilt
politicians...
that relationship, and that it shows real strength, and it's impressive. I think it's impressive for somebody to be able to stand up and build that relationship from our position. And Donald Trump has recognised how brilliant our country is and wants to do this trade deal with us. So it's a positive thing.
That's a perfectly legitimate point of view. Absolutely. Yeah. Why then did Keir Starmer criticise Theresa May for holding the hand of Donald Trump as she attended that visit to the White House? Why then for I think it was 7 long years. It was when they were walking up the slope towards the Oval Office. But again and again and again, frontbench Labour politicians in the last Parliament attacked government ministers for meeting Donald Trump, for talking to Donald Trump, and then as soon as they get into government, they do the opposite. Doesn't that get to what people hate about politicians? They say one thing in opposition and do another thing in office.
Maybe there is something about why people feel people change their minds and that's annoying, right? Maybe that is a point. But the fact of the matter remains, the Prime Minister has done a trade deal with our closest ally, which will deliver jobs, which is in the interest of our working people in this country. And that is what Labour is about. So obviously, that is a positive thing. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a negative to come out of it. I also think, in terms of trade deals and positioning, we are fundamentally putting Labour values at the heart of these, working people at the heart of it, and it's all about growth, and the starting point has got to be our communities.
We are going to move on to immigration now, because I want to bring some more of your questions in. Timmy and another viewer sort of making the same point, and this is a question to you, Ed Argar. Kemi Badenoch, please, immigration. Why do you think she didn't talk about immigration? Why do you?
Well, I think, first of all, we had a very lengthy debate in the House, I think, on Monday about immigration.
This is the centre point of the political week.
Kemi has previously gone on immigration at PMQs, but you get 6 questions as Leader of the Opposition once a week. And there are a whole range of things that really matter to people out there. Yes, immigration is absolutely one of them, but so is the cost of living, the damage that's been done to the economy by the last budget, the impact on people's businesses, on farmers in my constituency in Melton Mowbray and Syston of the family farm tax. So I think there's an awful lot of people who will also want her, quite rightly, to be holding the Prime Minister to account for the choices, and they were choices by the government on the economy.
Some people might think you don't want to talk about it because of the record on immigration that you left. And actually, the Prime Minister this week has been on the front foot saying we're going to deal with it. They didn't deal with it. Is that perhaps why she didn't go on immigration today in the big immigration week for the Prime Minister?
I don't think so. I think we went heavily on it on Monday when the Shadow Home Secretary was in the chamber for a lengthy period, as was the Home Secretary, answering questions from MPs. It's been discussed heavily in the media this week. She has raised it before. But so Timmy is right. This is an important issue. But there are also many other very important issues, like the economy. Did we get it all right when we were in government? No, we didn't. And it's important we are honest about that on immigration. Yeah, I'm saying, did we get it right? No, we didn't. And that's why I'm saying it's right. We're honest with people about that. But similarly, let's equally look at the relatively thin gruel, I think, that Yvette Cooper's proposing here, and look at the track record in opposition of the now Prime Minister, the now Home Secretary, and their opposition to anything that was going to try and control
24,000 people have been removed from this country which is the highest record for the last 5 years.
Most of those were voluntary returns.
So I would say the government is taking action on this important issue of immigration. On the doorstep in Darlington, people raise it, right? But for me, the immigration debate is actually about fairness. OK? This is about the value of fairness in this country. When you are looking at your own finances and you are struggling with the cost of living bearing down on you, you think to yourself, what is going on when there is a completely broken immigration system? My cousin actually worked for the Home Office processing some of those files, and she said it was absolutely, completely run so badly. It was chaos because there was no way people could get through them. And we've moved people from the Rwanda scheme, so those workers in the Home Office have moved from the Rwanda scheme, 300 of them, straight into processing. That's leading to action on this. So
we're just going to pause that conversation now. The images we're seeing on our screen of Qatar, where Donald Trump has been arriving. Of course, Donald Trump himself, someone who has been focusing on that issue of immigration. But there you can see the Beast, the car in which Donald Trump travels after he got off Air Force One. It has been greeted by horses, by camels, indeed by swordsmen as well, on the luscious green there in what would perhaps ordinarily be desert. This part of the world that is practically oozing with money, and that will be something that the president is thinking about in the deals that he's signing, or indeed hoping to sign, over the course of this 4-day Middle Eastern visit.
And today, I believe, is day 2 of that Middle East tour by the President of the United States, and all the pictures that you can see are showing that. And if you're listening, we're trying to describe as best we can what's happening now. I want to ask you a question, Lola, though, a further question on immigration, if I may. Keir Starmer has faced a bit of a backlash from many people in the Labour Party about the language that he used, the phrase island of strangers. He said in his speech on Monday, in his press conference, that if we don't get a grip as a country on immigration, we will end up being an island of strangers. And Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, Eleanor Morgan, the First Minister of Wales, all Labour figures, have been very upset about this. Who do you think's right on this? Do you see why it has caused some consternation, some upset, some distress among some people in your party?
So I think people are... some people are uncomfortable with the language that was used. I would say that in Darlington and in places around my area, people are very concerned about integration, but they're also concerned about fairness. And in terms of the language, we saw in PMQs that the Prime Minister said about that strangers point again, because what he's talking about is community, and he's talking about the fact that we want everybody to get on. When I speak to people about immigration, there are some people who have very, very extreme views on this, right? That's not the majority of people who are concerned about immigration. What they're concerned about is pressure on our services when their family can't get the services they expect to be there. And I think that's what Labour got to deliver on, and that's what we are hell-bent on delivering on. I mean, the local election results, ultimately, frankly, we've had to listen to that because that was a pretty clear message from places like Durham that the status quo is broken. They voted for us en masse in last year, and they have voted differently in those local elections. So we have heard that, we have taken that kick in, and we are going to address it through the cost of living and making sure that services are working. So it's about making sure you can get a mental health appointment. Like in Darlington, we heard mental health came up on the on PMQs as well from Jake Richards. Men's mental health in my area is shot. It is a really, really bad state of affairs. We've got a significantly high suicide rate, and we have a real problem. That absolutely needs addressing, and people can't get the services they need.
OK. I think we've got about 4 or 5 minutes to get in another subject, and I think this will be of interest to anybody who is watching and listening, particularly if you live outside London. And the hook for this is not just a question from Mel. Thank you, Mel. We always like to know where you're from as well as your name. She praised the question from the Labour MP, Jonathan Brash, on council tax, the injustice of somebody who lives outside London. He's a Hartlepool MP. And the contrast between somebody living in the same band of properties but paying more in pretty posh boroughs in London than they are in some hard-pressed areas outside London.
We should just say that on our screens now is Donald Trump, who has landed in Doha, Qatar, ahead of his second day of meetings in the Middle East. He's currently saluting what is a greeting ceremony there in Doha. Of course, he'll be meeting many of the different leaders throughout the Middle East. He's been meeting with the Syrian president. He's met with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and will be meeting with the Emir of Qatar as well. This in a big foreign affairs push from this president quite early on in his presidency. Normally it's the Vice President or Secretary of State who's sent out on these sorts of visits, and yet here we have President Donald Trump himself there, as we can see, saluting to this greeting ceremony there in Doha ahead of further meetings in the Middle East. The Qataris will be giving the President of the United States a plane as a gift. It's an unusual welcoming gift, really, for a politician or any visitor to any state. But those are the pictures we're seeing on our screen right now. Apologies for interrupting. Lola, the issue of council tax bans.
So on that, in Darlington, we can't squeeze the money we need to fill the holes in council tax budget from residents. You won't make it from increasing council tax.
Everybody's council tax has gone up.
It has. It's gone up. It's gone up by £109, and we do not want to be in a position where people are being hit in Band D properties. Don't want to be in a position where people are being hit any further, because the cost of living crisis is really bearing down. In terms of fairness, it obviously does need looking at. That's why the government's committed to this consultation. I think it's an interesting one because our government are committed to making sure that we devolve more power out of Westminster, and that is incredibly popular. Regardless of who people vote for as their mayors, having more power closer to communities makes better decisions. So we need multi-year funding settlements, but we cannot squeeze it on the backs of working people.
So the government are going to consult. It's been a thorny issue for as long as I can remember. Putting that too difficult to deal with box.
Yeah.
The government are going to deal with it and try and sort the injustice of the current system.
Well, the government are going to consult. They're consulting on an awful lot of things at the moment. They're not necessarily announcing anything. In my space, in health, a lot of reviews, but not much in the way of decision. But they are going to consult on this. I think Pat McFadden announced that this morning. And constituents in my constituency of Mountain Ison, just as in Lola's, will have opened earlier this year their council tax bills with a degree of trepidation, wondering how much was in there and how it had gone up since the last council tax bill. So it is right, I think, that we look at fairer funding across our councils. There's two elements. Obviously, council taxpayers pay council tax bill, but there's also a grant that comes from government on a formula and is allocated, which helps pay for local services as well. That hasn't changed for a long time. And I have long advocated, certainly from my county of Leicestershire, and I suspect the same will be true for